Hi, my name is Bill Conway, and welcome to the Sons of Issachar podcast today. I'd like to offer some thoughts on the issue of worship, and in particular, the object or focus of our worship. In the book of Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul makes it clear that human beings will choose to worship one of two things: the Creator God, or something created. Speaking of man in rebellion, Paul writes this: "For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God, or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of immortal God for images resembling mortal man, and birds, and animals, and reptiles." Romans 3, verses 21 to 23. Man has been created for worship. If men and women will not bow their knees before the God of creation, then they will prostrate themselves before something in creation, or what they create for themselves, idols of their own making. This should come as no surprise to us, for it is the strategy that Satan used to deceive our first parents. This should come as no surprise at all: the temptation to be as gods themselves, the temptation for self-worship. In Genesis chapter 3 and verses 4 to 5, the tempter speaks to Eve. "But the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not surely die. For God knows when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.'" When we consider ancient civilizations, such as the Egyptians, the Babylonians, Medo-Persia, etc., the Bible and history provide us with clear insight. The rulers, the leaders, the kings of these nations and empires were worshipped as gods. Pharaoh was the god of Egypt, Nebuchadnezzar was the god of Babylon, and Darius was the god of the Medes. Now listen to the counsel of Darius's bureaucrats when they spoke to him concerning righteous Daniel. They said, "Then the presidents and the satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, 'O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions.'" That's Daniel chapter 6, verses 6 and 7. When these men reported to Darius of Daniel's continued prayer and worship of Yahweh, Darius had no choice but to follow through with his injunction to cast Daniel into the lion's den. Why? Verse 12b in the same chapter tells us this. It says, "The king answered and said, 'The thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked.'" The god of the Medes and the Persians was Darius himself, and as God, he could not revoke his own edict. Roman coinage during the rule of Augustus Caesar bore this proclamation: "There is no name given under heaven by which a man might be saved than the name of Caesar Augustus." Does this sound at all familiar? It should. The Apostle Peter, speaking before the Sanhedrin in Acts chapter 4, verses 11 to 12, says this: "This Jesus is the stone that was rejected by you, the builders, which has become the cornerstone. And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. Is it any wonder Rome saw Christ's church as a political enemy? Rome was happy to include the God of the Christians in its pantheon, with the proviso that Caesar took primary place in worship. All they asked the Christians to do was to first offer a little incense on the altar to Caesar. This the Christians could not and would not do. The Roman arena symbolized both political and religious values. The blood of the Christian martyrs satisfied the appetites of both. Perhaps you're thinking that these scenarios typify ancient history but have no application for us in the 21st century. After all, we've evolved since then, haven't we? We don't bow down before stone images, unless we happen to be Buddhist or Hindu. We're not forced to offer incense on an altar to declare our allegiance to Ottawa, London, Washington, D.C., or Canberra. We're multicultural now. We subscribe to live and let live. All religions have equal value, don't they? I jest. In our country, no one is forced to embrace Islam or Baha'i. There are no police standing outside the church door on Sunday morning, photographing the congregants. While these scenarios are true, it doesn't mean that you and I may not be guilty of inward idolatry. What Satan had suggested to Adam and Eve was that they could choose to be gods and determine good and evil for themselves. They could live independent of God. They could establish their own laws. They could become objects of their own worship. Being equal with God meant he was actually irrelevant, no longer necessary. After all, they had food. They'd figure out how to build a shelter and find something more attractive than those leaf aprons. The question I want to ask and have us ponder for a truly honest answer is this: how much faith are you and I placing in the civil government and in its leaders to address the crises of today? For the Christian, we have to acknowledge the crisis is at its heart, both moral and spiritual. Is it reasonable to expect non-Christian leaders to rule according to God's righteous standards? If the answer is no, then any confidence we have in our leaders is woefully misplaced. But what if our leaders, or our prime minister, king, or president happens to be a professing Christian? Are we going to place our faith in them to get the job done? My goodness, as Christians we can't even agree on which version of the Bible to use. If the PM turned out to be a Baptist, the Presbyterians would lose all hope. But if somehow miraculously we did all agree with a Christian leader, is this different from Adam and Eve's confidence in their own abilities? Is there a risk that this confidence can and would become worship? As an enthusiastic Christian political activist in my younger days, I'd hoped that we could elect a Christian prime minister and that the conservatives in government would find their biblical roots. And for years, this was the end I and others like me worked toward. This top-down approach proved fruitless. Nevertheless, I continued in this strategy. But God's kingdom isn't a top-down hierarchy. It starts out as a mustard seed that grows from the ground up. It's like yeast that filters into culture and influences it gradually. I slowly began to realize all of my efforts to wrest the reins of political power from the ungodly were doomed. The answer did not lie in a political revolution, but in spiritual regeneration. The point I'm trying to make is this. While you and I see our cultures reaping the bitter harvest of ungodly government, of laws that enslave us through confiscatory taxation, of laws that have removed all protection for unborn children, are we seeking a systemic solution rather than crying out to God for His intervention? Have we placed a bureaucratic idol before us in place of our sovereign Lord? I'm not saying that we should refrain from political action. I'm not saying we should stop writing letters to our elected representatives on issues of concern. I'm not saying we should neglect conscience voting. We're called to be an influence in all aspects of society, including civil government, which can mean a prophetic word, a voice that speaks the Word of God. My particular concern is that well-meaning Christians might somehow see any civil leader as the answer to all of the world's problems. I'm sure Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, Caesar, and a plethora of others saw themselves as to the answer of all their nation's woes. And they believed that worship was an appropriate response to their leadership. My hope and prayer is that in the difficult times in which you and I live, we will not be tempted to look to leaders for similar messianic terms and solutions. In Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 to 6, the Lord gives us both a warning and a promise. We read, "You shall not make for yourselves a carved image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments." Followers of Jesus Christ worship Him alone, and they keep His commandments. In Jeremiah 17, God pronounced curses on the man who trusts in man, and blessings upon those who trust in Him. Eternity is in His hands. So is the destiny of nations. May each of our hearts be directed in worship to Him and Him alone, always. Thanks for listening. God bless.